If you could be happier, earning slightly less money, that's a good deal. But society wouldn't ever get you to think of it like that. I'm not as good as I thought. I'm not training as hard as I thought. I'm not as fit as I should be. And I can take those personal emotions and I can make them into a better person.
So people should get out there and close all of those open loops that are coming up in their brains right now, because that'll give your brain more bandwidth then, and it'll also mean you're gonna learn something from those things.
There's a level of competency that increases with failing. And if people could only see failing as a pathway to getting better, suddenly getting rejected by the girl or asking your boss for a pay rise and them saying they don't have the budget, all of these things, they pay into developing your skills of communication, rejection, failure, and that bulletproof nature that you can grow over time is what will mean in a few years' time, people will look at you and go, it's all right for him, he's confident. When people are looking for confidence in something, really they're looking for something to get them to point in the direction of taking actions. And I think psychedelics a lot of the time point people in the direction of doing actions, drinking less, smoking less, going out less, and doing things that are more positive to the outcome that they need for values. Whatever you need to do it every day. 5 times a week versus every day, I think every day is better. You can never do these things too frequently, successful habits, because it shouldn't be a weekday thing, it should be an everyday thing.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is James Smith, the personal trainer, best-selling author, and one of the biggest names in the fitness industry. With over 1 million followers on Instagram, you've become one of the most recognizable faces in fitness thanks to your no-nonsense approach to helping people achieve their goals. Your career began after you grew tired of the corporate grind and decided instead to pursue a life that made you happy and fulfilled. You're passionate about exposing the toxic myths within diet culture and committed to helping people reach their goals and make a positive and lasting change. Your 2 previous books, Not a Diet Book and Not a Life Coach, both reached the #1 spot on the Sunday Times bestseller list, and your latest book in the series, How to Be Confident, explores how we can all master our true ambitions and realize our strengths in a world that is all too often filled with negativity. James, welcome to London Real.
Very surreal, but very happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. We got a lot of things in common, which I'm sure we'll talk about on the show. A book about confidence. Let's jump right in and talk about it, because in researching this book, you must have had to really think hard about what is confidence? Do you have confidence? Who has confidence? And there's like tons of nuances in this book that I'd love to dive into. But like on the surface, what is confidence? And when we see someone with confidence, like a Conor McGregor, is that real confidence? Is that something anyone can attain? Now, what did you discover when you were writing this book?
So I think confidence sits on many different spectrums, and one of which that I like is I put confidence on one side and anxiety on the other. And I say that anxiety is predicting an outcome of it going wrong, and confidence is predicting an outcome of it going right. And how you predict something is going to go is tied to expectations. So when we're looking at people, they're not different to us. They haven't got different DNA or anything like that. They've got a different lens in which they see the world, a different set of perceptions and values, and those things we control. Many of them are beliefs, and beliefs can be changed. So a lot of people are programmed, whether it's an evolutionary thing, a societal thing, to predict a bad outcome. I think that probably saved many humans over thousands of years, but in everyday life, that tendency to lean towards a pessimistic outcome, I think is hindering people's ambitions and potential, but society doesn't really care if you're not confident, and businesses don't care, the taxpayer doesn't care, all of these things. Like, no one's going to come and make you more confident. And it's a very nuanced, strange topic. And people have said to me, only in the last few years, you've got a lot of confidence. So I was like, probably not. I probably have a good relationship with failing, and I probably have a good relationship with predicting a good outcome, because I'm happy to be wrong if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. That's something I think you can learn, is being comfortable taking risk and being comfortable with a failure. And that makes you take more risks and actually have more wins and successes. And then people see you and say, look how confident you are. When in fact, maybe you've just mastered the art of risk taking. And
yourself sat here, very natural, calm, composed. Someone goes, oh, he's just a confident guy. And you go, no, he's done 1,000 podcasts. He's mastered the repetition. Same with martial artists. Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo, about 4-5 years ago, he won that match in a matter of seconds, and people were very quick to divide the amount of money he made by the seconds, and were like, oh, he got paid $2 million a second. And you're like, no, there was years before that. There was countless hours, months. There were training sessions that went well, that didn't go well, and all of these things accumulated over time were what got that performance. He wasn't, just confident, he was ready. And I think those are two very different things. And the key point that when I was asked to write a book on confidence, I sat and I thought about it, and I went, so many people are using a lack of confidence as a guise to hide behind, to exist with making decisions that point to inaction. If people aren't doing something proactively, it's very easy to just say you're not confident enough to do it. There are so many deltas or forks in the road that we get to where we can either make a choice or we don't. And when people continually don't make choices, they need a label to give themselves as to why they didn't make a choice when others did. And they use confidence as a reason to not do anything.
Is that a standard narrative you hear people, or people say to themselves, is I'm not confident, I'm just not confident, I lack the confidence. And then that just becomes procrastination, stalemate, and then nothing happens.
100%. And one of the things that I used in the book was the Zygoonic Effect, where waiters that work in restaurants, when they close the bill, they forget what people have ordered. So they only really remember the bills that are still open. And the reason for that is once the bill's been paid, they don't need to remember it anymore. And I talk about this as being open and closed loops. So the waiters have an open loop. They need to have mental computing to remember that in case the machine makes a mistake. But when they've closed the loop, they get closure and they can put it to bed and they don't need the computing anymore. So I hypothesize in the book that maybe many people are creating a lot of open loops. You see someone on the tube and you go, wow, I'd love to talk to that person. Maybe I could give her my number. Or you're in a meeting and you want to say something and express something that you disagree with. It might be your boss, you had a one-on-one with him and you wanted to express that you feel undervalued. In essence, we are opening these loops like the Zygoonic Effect. And I want to get people in a position where they get the opportunity to close it, because when you close it, you can eradicate that computing power in your mind. And anyone that's got married, again, I hypothesize, I'm not married, there's always kind of mental machinery working for people that are single. Who am I going to end up with? Who am I going to marry? When am I going to meet this person? And when men get married, and I'm sure women as well, they close the loop of that worry and decision making about who they're going to be with, and they can relax more. And as I hope so, when you're married, you have this whole part of your brain that you can continue to use. So when I need to motivate people somehow to make more decisions that point towards action, I see it as closing loops. So you have a thought in your mind, put it to bed. You want to ask something, put it to bed. And if the outcome's bad, that's completely fine, because bad outcomes or failures or things not going to plan do two things. They point the finger in the direction of how you can improve on that, and they also add to a level of competency. So many of the lessons I've learned in life, I learned by accident. And before being in the corporate world, I ended up in door-to-door sales for N-Power in Gloucester in winter.
Ooh.
Yeah,
at least it wasn't during inflation times. That would have been even harder.
So yeah, I would not have been allowed into so many houses, but I had a conversation, and my mum and dad worked really long and hard to provide a great life for me. And when I finished university, I kind of messaged my dad, and I was like, times are tough out here. You know, I've just finished university. I haven't got a job. And he was like, oh, go to the job center. And I was like, okay. And I was like, oh, but Dad, you know, what if I don't find a job? He was like, oh, well, you can sign on. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you can sign on the dole. He goes, I paid tax for the last 50 years. It's for people like you. And I was like, oh. So I went to the job centre, these little touch screens in Gloucester City Centre, where I was at uni. First job that came up was working for Npower door to door. And I was thinking to myself, what would I rather do, this or sign on? And I was like, this. So I even went to interview for the job. We spoke before about, I was thinking about wearing a suit. The day of my interview, I didn't have any dark socks. I only had white socks, tennis socks with a suit. On my first interview that I've ever had as an adult, I'm wearing tennis socks with a grey suit. I'm having to like pull my trousers down the whole time. I couldn't cross my legs. I get the job and I have to go out and pretty much convert people from their existing supplier to Npower. Luckily, British Gas just put their prices up. So I knock on people's doors. And some people would think I'm there to read the meter. They go, come in. They go, oh, I'm not with Npower. I go, exactly. They're like, get the fuck out, you know, don't come in. But with this, I remember having a bit of a meltdown, maybe 2-3 months in. And my boss said to me, he goes, for every 100 doors you knock on, you make a sale. You need 3 more sales for today. Go knock on 300 more doors. I thought about that and I thought, every time I get rejected, it's not a bad thing. It's not a self-worth thing. It's me putting myself that little bit closer to that sale. And knowing that it's hundreds of doors away makes it a little bit easier. But also I thought, as I go through my career of doing this, that 100 doors is going to become 90 because I'm going to become more competent, then it'll become 80. And then where we see these guys who are like smooth talkers, going in, gas and electric, signing people up, there's a level of competency that increases with failing. And if people could only see failing as a pathway to getting better, suddenly getting rejected by the girl or asking your boss for a pay rise and them saying they don't have the budget, all of these things, they pay into developing your skills of communication, rejection, failure. And that bulletproof nature that you can grow over time is what will mean in a few years' time, people will look at you and go, it's all right for him, he's confidence.
Right, okay. So people should get out there and close all of those open loops that are coming up in their brains right now, because that'll give your brain more bandwidth then, and it'll also mean you're gonna learn something from those things. And like you said, either be confronted with something you're not doing good enough or get some competence. So it's interesting, I've had a lot of authors in that chair, and a lot of them say, the reason I wrote the book is so I could now focus on new things. Because all the ideas, they couldn't get them out of their head until they put them down in a form that they knew were safe, basically. And now they could open their head to work on new ideas. So I always thought that was interesting as far as kind of closing that loop out to then move on to something else. But tell me about fear, because like you said, back in the savannah, we were scared of everything. And that meant that the bump in the night, all these things, it kept us maybe on our toes from the saber-toothed tiger or making sure, you know, that our kids were fed, and it was functional. In this day and age, especially with all of our phones beeping and popping and all these things, most of our fear receptors or fear indicators, they aren't life and death situations, but we take them as life and death situations. And add that within social media, and we'll talk about that. That maybe slowly grinds down people's confidence and their ability to take risks. And so then you get a bunch of people that are stuck, maybe stuck not making decisions, stuck in procrastination. Is that kind of what we see? And do you think it's important for people now to re-engineer risk into their lives based on understanding the world that way?
Yeah, and I mean, the pessimism bias is something that I find fascinating. I joke around when I do the live talks. I try and bring like an element of like stand up into it. And I joke and I say, whenever I get a little pain in my side, I think, oh, this is it. I'm gonna die. Or, you know, we all get that little sharp pain and we're like, what is this? Is something serious? Oh my God,
Cancer.
This is how it ends. And then like 2 days later, you're like, oh, that pain never came back. Or you get a phone call at 10 p.m. and you're like, who died? You know, we always have this, no one's ever thinking, oh, this is gonna be the best news of my life. We always have this tendency to favor a pessimistic outcome. And, you know, I experienced this when I was in my single days dating. The second before you're about to go on a date, you're like, this is gonna be the worst date ever. And you do have to kind of reverse engineer that and go, what if this is the best date that I ever go on? And we're very, very bad at doing that. And like you say, from an evolutionary perspective, being overconfident probably wouldn't have been the best, especially with, you know, heuristics. How far away is that island? Could I swim to it? Yeah, you know, next thing you're caught in a rip and that's the end of your DNA. So I think that a lot of the time that tendency to be pessimistic is a safety net, but we need to reverse engineer it. Like you say, there's a chapter I talk about kind of Pyrrhic victories, where the victory is tantamount to defeat, where a picture that I saw once was a dog jumping off a cliff to bite a bird. And yeah, he gets the bird, but yeah, he also dies in the process. We don't really have any Pyrrhic issues that we face on a day-to-day basis. The outcome is never going to be truly that severe. And, you know, even let's say yourself, you want a guest for the show, you're on their Instagram, suddenly you arrive at your destination, you might go, do you know what? Right now, I'm gonna message that person and ask them to come on, I'm gonna close that loop. Even if you do have a pessimistic outcome and go, they're not gonna say yes, you can start putting all these kind of different biases together. And I think that another one that kind of works together is pessimism bias and loss aversion, where we feel the psychological losses feel psychologically twice as worse as the alternative gaining it. You know, losing 10 pounds walking through East London, where's that tenner, feels worse than finding 20 pounds on the floor. There's a study that was done on two groups of people. Half were given a mug and half were given a chocolate bar. And although they were equated to be the similar value, if you offered them to swap, they wouldn't. And I joke going, the person with the mug would go, well, I'm not gonna have a cup of tea and a chocolate bar, am I? You're like, all right. Then you go to the other side and you talk to the chocolate bar people, they go, well, I can't eat a fucking mug. So once you have hold of something, it's a lot harder to give it up. And then that plays in with sunk cost fallacy. But with the loss aversion thing, say you're in a job that you don't find rewarding, you've now got pessimism bias, I'm gonna leave and hate the job more. Or you feel the psychological pain of losing your existing salary and safety net or comfort. You worry about losing that more than you can the idea of gaining something better, like a better work-life balance or whatever it is. So with the writing of the books, really what I'm doing is finding flaws in the way we think about things and bringing to people's attention how they come together. Like the loss aversion, psychological pain of losing things, we know objectively is something that we need to worry about. So then we look at sunk cost fallacy where, hey guys, just to let you know that you're going to struggle to walk away from things that you've put time, effort, and energy into, and you're going to make bad decisions based off not the fact it's a good idea, but you're making a decision based on your previous investment. So we've all had friends in toxic relationships, and we say to them, why are you still with this guy? And they're, oh, we've been together 4 years. They're using their previous investment as a reason to remain invested, not whether or not that's a serving relationship. So then we've got sunk cost fallacy, we've now got loss aversion. The fear of losing the toxic partner is causing more psychological distress than the idea of gaining someone else. And it's all of these things together combined with societal things and everything else that gives people this illusion that they don't have confidence. And even just bringing to people's attention these fallacies, we can start to break down and give them the understanding of why they feel this way. Because even though we're more connected digitally than ever, I don't feel like we share enough genuine emotions. And the fact that so many of us can seem fearless or confident because of the way we portray ourselves may make people feel they're very unique in having fears, in worrying about negative outcomes and in worrying about losing things, when the truth is, if we can let people know that we all feel the same, we can all work together to dismantle these beliefs to make decisions easier to make.
Yeah, I think definitely social media seems to show us all of these people in our life now, hundreds of thousands that have skyrocketed confidence. Whereas back in my day, when I was on my block in San Diego in the 80s, like I didn't meet that many people that had confidence. Maybe I'd see a Rocky movie or a magazine cover, but I didn't have these interactions like on social, where now I can see someone that can pretty much do anything in the world. And now they're on my show. So I got like the Dan Bilzerians and the best boxers in the world, the best writers in the world, and they do make you feel like you're lacking sometimes, when in fact they're just normal people as well. You just happen to see that one thing they do really well, and they're probably very insecure about a lot of that stuff too. So that's a real issue. I want to just get back to this thought of engineering risk, because this is something I struggled with for a long time. And I went to school as an engineer. I got a mechanical engineering degree at MIT, and they basically teach you to make sure that the plane doesn't fall out of the sky, the bridge doesn't break. And so you take this, bias towards failure and you magnify it, because as an engineer, your job is literally to make sure these things don't happen. But I found myself, when I started this show, I was in a real risk-averse situation. And it wasn't until I met one of my mentors, Dan Pena, the $1 trillion man, who I both love and hate equally, where he basically said, you need to be taking more risk in your life. And you need to engineer risk back into your life, because what you'll find out is most of the fears are unfounded and the wins will just out-magnify all of it. And most people will forget about your losses and just remember your wins. And that's allowed me to do things that I never would have imagined doing, like running for mayor in 2020, like things that I would have never imagined. I signed myself up for a boxing match earlier this year at the O2 Arena when Martin Ford asked me to go on his card. I was 51 years old. I'm telling you, James, when I was 41 and in better shape physically, I would have been mentally unprepared to do that. But once I understood my mind, I thought, wait a second, okay, it's 3 rounds. Okay, I get KO'd on television and it's on YouTube forever. But like, what's the worst that can happen? But the 41-year-old Brian, he couldn't handle that. I would have been terrified to do that. But now I can look at it in my brain and say, okay, you got about, how many more years you got left? 30 years left? You want to make this an incredible life. Well, then you're going to have to engineer that risk into your life. And maybe from the outside, that looks like confidence or arrogance, I'm not sure. But for me, it's the only way I can enjoy my life now, is to put myself way out of my comfort zone and to kind of see what happens.
Our enemies are always greater in our imagination than they'll ever be in real life. And Ryan Holiday, in his recent book, Courage is Calling, talks about some men that are in I think they're in the desert or they're in Africa, they're somewhere, and they're surrounded by grass, tall grass, and they can hear wolves. And they're thinking, we're all going to get eaten, the horses are going to get eaten. Do we turn around? Do we move? It's howling all night. And when they moved forward, there was only 2 of them making all the noise. But in their minds, there were enough to devour the whole load of them. So he said, there are always more wolves until they're counted. And that really resonated with me. And I was thinking about it. And even we spoke offline about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. My opponent in my mind is always stronger, scarier. He trains harder. He gets up earlier. He's a savage, all of these things. And then you compete against them. They're the nicest people. They're no different to you. You think, oh, in competition, someone might try and hurt me. They never really do. And I say to people, when it comes to competing in jiu-jitsu, it terrifies me. It honestly does.
Have you done it yet?
Yeah.
Okay,
And whenever I get comfortable, similar to what you were saying, I'm like, I need to do a comp. I can't be comfortable. And it ruins my weekend. I stress about it. I can't even be present with people the day before or the morning of, or even when I see my teammates. They're like, hey, what time are you on? And I'm like, I don't even enjoy this interaction, but whether I win or lose, it's a net benefit. Like you say, I'm exposing myself to more risk. I'm now training with someone who doesn't have the motivation to keep me injury free or to not do anything stupid. Like, we can't jump guard in training because we're all in the same academy. We want to keep people safe. But in competition, that's permitted. Or someone can break my leg and it's completely fine with no whatever. So when I compete, at the end of it, I go, it wasn't that bad, but I expose myself to the risk, the danger, the fear, the insecurities. But at the same time, the fear is normal. And again, we're at this kind of delta where we can move in 2 ways. We can either see victory or loss. But strangely enough, sometimes I go and I kind of hope I lose. And this is a weird thing to say, because the times I've lost, I'm a different person the day after. Because I wake up, I know I'm not as good as I thought, I'm not training as hard as I thought, I'm not as fit as I should be. And I can take those personal emotions and I can make them into a better person. Winning makes you weak. Conor McGregor again. I think he's won too much. Credit to him for it. The fact that he hasn't won in a long time, all of these things are all credited to his success. In some respects, he got too good. So when we are faced with this fear in yourself, with the boxing, I'm sure that if you did get knocked out, where most people would think, oh, he'll be embarrassed, all of this, you might wake up the next day as someone that goes, I'm gonna do that better. I'm gonna hire a boxing coach. I'm gonna learn to keep my gloves up. I'm gonna be faster. I'm gonna improve my footwork. And people without the same values would go, why is he doing that again? When really you've just created this new, hungrier version of yourself. And I think that exposing ourselves to these failures is really just such a great way to bridge the connection to a version of yourself you might need to be to get to the person you want to become.
Yeah, very much so. I was training for this fight, and I got the privilege of training with David Haye in his boxing gym south of the river, Haymaker, and David's been kind of a friend for many, many years. And he got me down there, and I only had about 6 weeks to train, and so the philosophy was I wouldn't do any sparring because of injury. And David watched me after like 3 sessions, and he's like, you got to do some sparring, Brian, with someone you've never met before. You have to do it mentally. He's like, otherwise, all this is nonsense. You're going to hit pads. Who gives a shit? And so he said, I'm going to set you up with a sparring partner, and you're not going to meet him. You're not going to know anything about him. We're going to do this just like a fight on Sunday. You're going to show up at 6 o'clock. I'm going to bring him in the ring with the call signs, and you guys are going to go at it. And we did that. And he's like, Brian, it's going to be the longest day of your life. And I was out there, like, it was the hardest thing. I was thinking about it all day. I couldn't even be with my kids. Outside the gym, I was like, cold sweats going through my mind. What's going to happen? My jaw's going to break. Like, all these crazy situations, right? I get in there, it's this kid half my age, Filipino kid taller than me. I'm just like, are you kidding me? And it was a tense and difficult 3 rounds. But afterwards, it was just massively eye-opening. Like, none of the bad stuff happened. I learned on the back of it. The next set was even better. And it was just like, okay, we progress. But it was probably the scariest thing I've done in years, just putting myself in a situation that now in retrospect wasn't scary. And then I looked at that and I'm like, how many of these things am I putting in the rest of my life, building them up to be these scary things when they're just not?
I think we don't share this enough, and George St. Pierre speaks about this. He says that he was frightened to the point he couldn't sleep before every match. And the only one match that he wasn't so fearful that he could actually have a good night's sleep, he lost.
Matt Serra.
Yeah, Matt Serra.
Yeah.
And everyone was expecting it was a massive upset. But I think that we need to remind ourselves that the people we hold in the highest regard are scared too. And that's completely fine. And we do need to repackage our thoughts. We do need to see things through a different lens. And like some of the white belts that I train, I take a class on a Friday and I speak to them and they go, shall I compete? I go, whichever way it goes, it's going to be the best thing you do, because you're going to come in as a different person. I think that fear isn't a bad thing. Fear is a tool we should use. And a good friend of mine says, the lessons we need are in the tasks we're avoiding. And whenever I kind of question something to her, I go, shall I do this? She'll just say that. And I'll go, wow, like, that's completely right. And if we don't have those levels of discomfort, we live in almost like an echo chamber where, for instance, some celebrities that do jiu-jitsu only do privates with people that they pay. Similar to yourself, you went in the ring with someone who is going to hit you in the face if you put your gloves down, whereas the person you pay probably isn't in the coaching side of things.
That's what David said.
Yeah, and
you're training, you're paying him. He'll tell you he's going to give you a hard session, but he's not really.
And Tom Hardy, I think last weekend, competed in a reorg competition in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I heard that.
He won both of his brackets, and I was like, that shows to me, like, he would have had the same thing where people get excited when they roll with you. Like, I'm sure Purple Belt also, people see that, oh, it's that guy, I'm going to fuck him up, whatever. The fears that you start building up, when really those people finish, they shake your hand, they're like, I love your podcast. You would have seen them in your head as someone who potentially wanted to hurt you or show you up. Like you say, those fears in our mind, we always multiply them. We always magnify them. And I'm sure for hundreds of thousands of years, that was a net benefit. But right now, it's just going to crush and limit and hinder the ambitions of millions of people.
Let's finish up with Conor McGregor, because he seems to have this massive amount of confidence, which I can't tell if it's real or if it's not real, but he clearly believes it, because when he doesn't win or he breaks his leg, like, he's still out there talking smack and calling people out, and he believes he can win. And I'm just wondering, for most people, can you fake it until you make it with confidence? Or does part of you who's watching every action of you every day, that can see when you're cutting corners, when you're not honoring your word to yourself, when you're not putting in the work you know you need to do, can you really be confident over time if you're not that person, you know?
I think about this a lot.
It's like the $10,000 question, right?
And I think that if you set making it as this and you have to fake it to get there, then that shouldn't be making it. And again, with Conor, like, I admire him so much as an athlete. I think that he's probably overstepped the lines with some of the things he's done. But then again, I have this time, right, where you actually have to think about your flaws as a contributing part of your success. So sometimes I'll get too drunk on a night out and I'll wake up the next day with a sore head and I'll think, fuck, is this congruent to a successful life or getting the most? I'm written a book about, make the most, reach your potential. And I think to myself, am I reaching my potential getting drunk? And then I think, this is a contributing part of my success and I must embrace it. I think for him, even though he has these flaws and we could point out these inadequacies, they are part of his identity that make him so good. But one thing that I think he might have underestimated is how hungry he made other people. Because I talk about inspiration being a part of confidence. And I think it was Nelson Mandela that said, no one believes it's possible until it's done. And I think that for so many of us, one should eradicate and battle our insecurities and try and make the greatest we can out of our lives, not just for ourselves, but for other people watching. And inevitably people watching your podcast or Joe Rogan's. When people can spearhead to these incredible heights of achievement, they pull through people that now know it's possible. And they will work tirelessly, because if you don't think something can be done, it's going to really hinder your ability to do it. And this is why Elon Musk, to me, is an incredible, incredible human, because he doesn't need someone in front of him to follow in the slipstream. He creates them for other people. So for Conor, as far as being a great fighter, he has spearheaded a whole new world for other fighters, like Dustin Poirier, people like that. And now that they know what they can get with hard work, I think it's going to be near enough impossible for him to get above them. I think, again, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the wolf climbing the hill is hungrier than the wolf at the top. I would love to see him come back. I'd love to see him win again. My hypothesis is maybe he needs less people around him that say yes. And again, I don't know him. I don't know his inner circles. I don't know anything about him. That's just my observation from someone that's only seen snippets of him. But I feel everyone, should have someone around them that can slap them into shape and say, that wasn't good enough. You need to do this. You need to stop being like that.
Yeah. Also, once you beat someone and show that they're beatable, everybody looking at the top of that hill, they look at you different. We saw it with Ronda Rousey. We saw it with so many champs where everyone's like, oh, wow, they're beatable. And even though you would think fighters know that everyone's a human and they all have a carotid artery that can be squeezed and then go unconscious, but until they see it, and once we saw Nate Diaz take out Conor, I feel like everybody, they stopped giving him too much respect. He was an illusion before. It was like the Conor would come and he would beat you before the bell rang. But now they just saw that there was a flaw and he was beatable, which I think makes it.
I was reading and researching this book, The Expectation Effect, which is a book about the power of expectations. And even when you look into the realm of like placebos and people taking, say they take a painkiller, if the pill was bigger, people reported it to be even more effective, even if it was a placebo, because their expectation of it. And I played rugby for 15 years. And I remember playing in New Zealand, there were a lot of islanders who were very religious. And I always thought to myself, I wonder how much better they perform thinking they have God on side. I was like, if there's a 50-50 collision and they feel that their God is with them, I was like, it's hard to compete with that, because similar to Conor McGregor, and there was that magical thing about, can this guy be defeated? And if you're going into the ring, even as a professional athlete, you're asking yourself the same question. I can't remember where it's from. They talk about if God can bleed, then suddenly, like you say, people know it can be possible and people fall off that cliff, and the people fighting them aren't necessarily becoming better athletes. They're just getting better belief in the outcome. Again, that confidence and anxiety spectrum, seeing someone lose moves them more away from the predicting the outcome of failure and more so closer to predicting the outcome of success. And confidence is massively rewarded in sport. And it's such an incredible topic.
It's a winner take all. I mean, look at Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx. I'm a huge fan of his, but he had a mediocre UFC career for 8 years. I mean, I always loved watching him. He had great jiu-jitsu, but he was not winning until the last 3 years, where he's been on an absolute tear. And he believes he believes he is almost chosen for this role. And he goes in there and puts it all on the line, and you just kind of know he's going to win. And he believes that God is on his side. He says, I am the enlightened one. And it's something switched in his mindset. There's a great example of confidence, or channeling the quantum field, or a bunch of things you talk about in here. But it's really obvious in sport, especially in combat sport, because is he have better skills than the Oliveira from 4 years ago? Not necessarily. But now he has decided he will win, and he does win. And it's fascinating to watch.
He's incredible. And I mean, looking at some of his fights where he almost looked like he didn't want it, and you're like, how is this the same person? And one of the chapters, I went back to GCSE PE, where we learned about Natch and NAF, need to achieve personalities and need to avoid failure personalities. And even just goal kickers in rugby that kick at the posts, when they're presented with the choice, are we going to take the kick? The captain will, you'll look at your fly half, you go, are we going to get this? And you can tell someone that's not afraid to lose, again, this like predicting the outcome of success, they're going to take it, they need to achieve, they're not focused. If it misses, they just need to get the next one. But some people are crippled by needing to avoid failure. And that is a really tough thing. They look at the posts and go, I can't, afraid to miss. But this varies across all sports. So then think about tennis. Your first serve would be need to achieve. I need to ace this. But your second serve, I need to avoid failure or I give up points. So this mindset can be swapped, it can be changed, and it can be something that we breed into people. And you feel that even with Oliveira's amazing performances, he's still been dropped a few times for exposing his jaw, but that's because he's more concerned about the punch he's throwing than he is the one that's coming towards him. And it is inspiring to see that. And I do, although I'm not a religious person myself, I've become fascinated with people that manage to utilize belief to improve their performance. And even Jordan Peterson talks at lengths about God. And I look at him as someone who's hugely intellectual, very smart. And I'm like, is he talking about an actual God or a set of principles? And I'm still not sure myself. But if he can utilize that and create a form, a means, or a way of bettering someone's performance, their livelihood, everything, then it's something that needs to be respected.
Yeah, definitely. If someone believes they are influenced or protected by the divine, if you can channel that energy, it's a different level. And Jordan was here in that chair talking a lot about God. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. And like many of us, we're sometimes brought up with a bit of an aversion sometimes to people being overly religious. But when you listen to Jordan talk more, he's talking about stories in the Bible, and you're like, why is this guy talking about the Bible? And he said, you know, the Bible, it's the stories in the Bible are in our DNA. They're basically just lessons for life. And so sometimes he talks about God, but he's really talking about channeling higher levels of energy, which is what all humans want to do, can do, aspire to do. And if you look at it that way, it's an incredible tool that you can tap into, and something I've played with over the years and been playing with a lot lately, and it's powerful.
Do you know, I went to a religious school, they were like, okay, RE, religious education, you've got to go in. And I remember I was very disruptive at school, I was very poorly behaved. And I'd be reading stuff, and I'd be like leaning back on my chair, and I'd say to people, I was like, this is bollocks, you know.
Right, he's walking on water, what are you talking about?
I was like, I've just done physics, lads, and this don't add up, you know, so I'd have fun with it. So then I found myself moving towards like atheism. Then I found myself like moving towards like trying to convince people that and I don't know why I was doing this when I was younger, but like, let's say I was sat with a Christian fellow mate, someone who was going to church on a Sunday. I would say things that kind of looking back now were disrespectful. I go, let's pick 5 religions. You know, we've got all 5 of them here. If one of them's right, 80% of you are wrong. It's not good odds, you know. But now looking back to it, after doing psychedelics, although I had many discoveries and epiphanies or whatever, I was left with there's something. And that was enough to push me more towards maybe an agnostic. And that was a big eye-opener for me. And I was like, I'm not sure what it is, but there's something. And now, even as a science-based person, when I look at the universe, the Big Bang, creation of life, all of these things, I actually went through a phase of knowing a little bit, probably like a Dunning-Kruger effect. Then I realized, there can't be anything there. But now I'm at the other end of it with years to reflect on it. It is very incredible to think there's something.
Wait till you get even older. There'll be something. And look, I think your religious experiences for a lot of people in this world, especially grew up in like our time where maybe it was forced down your throat. You rejected it at first. It didn't make sense. You push back on it. But then the older you get, you're like, wait a second, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a reason. I think religion is just technology for humans. Maybe there's a reason that they talk about these stories and these lessons. Maybe it makes us a better society. Maybe there are some things we can't observe with our 5 senses. You know, maybe there are some other powers and things. So it gets you to open your mind up a little bit. And then, a psychedelic experience can change that. Or sometimes a meditative experience can also change that. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on out there. But there's something more happening than just what they teach you in physics class. I've got Richard Dawkins here tomorrow. And this is a guy that wrote The God Delusion. And he would reject everything that we're talking about right now. Everything is down to the science. There's no higher power. So it's always interesting to hear people like that. People have said to Richard, smoke some DMT and you'll disagree, but I don't think he's taken anybody up on that challenge.
I could be wrong, but isn't he at the forefront of talking about how soon even the matter that hold our thoughts together will be expanded to the point that thoughts won't exist, light won't exist, the photons will be pulled apart. So he's kind of a bit of a pessimist with the outcome of the universe. He's like, we won't be alive then, but soon everything we know as matter will be torn apart and sucked into black holes. And, you know,
atheism is quite pessimistic.
But I think that even exactly like you say, you'd be like, okay, cool, I fully respect your decision. We're going to get you DMT in a vape. you're going to have 4 puffs, and then let's just see if there's a change of mind. But then again, I'm trying to convert someone to what I see my reality of the universe being like. But yeah, it's interesting. I think that I would love it. It's obviously a ludicrous idea that everyone should have some type of psychedelic experience. Obviously, I don't think everyone benefits from it. But when I look at the world and the way it is, and I see like violence and malice and all of these things, I think if I was to look back at someone said to me a couple of days ago, they're like, you're a different person to 3 years ago, you've really matured. And when I was looking at like the key steps of maturation, seeing the world differently, I even decided I want to have kids on a mushroom trip. And I was like, people will hear this and go, what James is talking about is an illegal substance, it's controlled. This is, not good. I've always been open. I think honesty is a very important thing with this thing. But I was like, these net decisions have made me a better person. I started drinking less after one trip. I decided I want to have kids after another. I decided that I had a really introspective conversation with some friends, and I started thinking to myself, it's very important that I do well in life. I look at my social media following that's growing, I look at my businesses, I look at financial freedom I'm very privileged that I earn more than I spend. And I joke with my friends, I'm like, that makes us wealthy. It doesn't matter if you've got $1 million in the bank or whatever. But one part of me on a psychedelic trip said, what's going to impress your parents more? Bringing home a Ferrari or a family? And the voice in my head said to me, don't get to the end of your life and don't win the wrong races. And I was like, wow, I was like, Jesus, there are races here that, are tied to being a good parent or, being a good partner or all of these things. And I was like, at the end of the day, having the most money and the most followers isn't going to be the race that really is going to be rewarding. And I was like, wow. And I went away from that and I thought about my work-life balance and everything. And it's crazy that I'm grateful to a substance that's controlled and frowned upon using, whereas I actually have a relationship with alcohol where I'm like, I know this is destructive. I know this isn't good for me. I know this doesn't make me feel good. And it's just crazy that the narratives that exist around these things, even bringing people closer to a God, is illegal. But then again, I'm a personal trainer who's had mushrooms a few times. I'm not a Richard Dawkins or anyone like this.
Yeah, we should talk about psychedelics. I mean, we've been having these conversations for pretty much since the start of this show. It's always come up. I probably talked to 30 of the top people when it comes to psychedelics, from professors at Imperial College like Professor David Nutt, Robin Carhart Harris, that are literally doing studies with fMRIs when they inject people with psilocybin to see what it does. And they found people stop smoking, stop drinking, issues with anorexia, anxiety all go away with sometimes a one dose. People like Rick Dublin at MAPS, they're using MDMA therapy to help soldiers get over their PTSD. I've had experiences with ayahuasca, with DMT, with psilocybin mushrooms that have completely changed my life. So let's talk about this. Why is the psychedelic experience make major changes in your life? Why do you think that is? And how does that differ from a drug? Because alcohol is a drug, it's just something that's legal, that seems to create a lot of A&E occurrences, seems to have just a different experience, toxify the human body, lead to more deaths, etc.
And again, this is almost a narrative that doesn't want to be spoken about, where with alcohol, if we were to have like a lab setting here and we were like, okay guys, we're going to remove all the labels, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, memory loss, aggression, getting behind a wheel, all of these kind of poor logic decisions and rationality goes out the window. We're moving further from our reality with alcohol. Whereas with psychedelic experiences, you're going closer to your reality. You're diving in.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.